I want to share two things with you. One, this quote. Dr. Brene Brown says vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. And I also want to share with you this photo. And you're probably wondering, what do those two things have in common? Well, let me tell you. All right, so that photo, it says punch the window, and then on this, twice. What does that mean? Well, I got out of the Army in March of 2006, and for a year and a half after, I was struggling. Frustrated at people, at life, because I felt like every time I asked for an opportunity to speak, people were just boxing me in and saying I'm just a veteran, I should just speak to veterans. And when I felt that there was a lot of rejection, I felt like there was a lot of people that weren't listening to understand who I was and what I felt I brought to the table, which in my opinion was more than just being a veteran. Unfortunately, I fell into this habit of where I was holding on to a lot of this. I was becoming angry, I was drinking, and on the surface, everything looked good. But then I'd go back home and I'd just be mad and angry, and I was just holding on to this. Because vulnerability, and going back to that quote, being vulnerable was something I wasn't taught. I didn't understand what vulnerability meant. As a man, as someone who served in the military, I mean, literally in our society in general, it's not something we talk about openly. And so, August 2007, I happened to be in Indianapolis with three other veterans. And we went out one night to dinner, and I had a couple drinks, and we're driving back to the hotel. And somebody in the car makes a comment. And it's just, we're all just cutting up, joking around, no big deal. But whatever was said, I made a snarky remark back. And I'm in the third row. Now, if you pan back, you can see I have a third row in my car. So imagine me way back there. Well, the driver is my best friend, Dan. He's up here driving, and he hears that, and he tells me, JR, chill out. Well, I didn't like to hear somebody tell me to chill out, because I felt I was validated. Like, with all the stuff I was carrying around, I was mad, I was angry. So here I am in the back seat, and I was like, don't tell me to chill out. And we start kind of mouthing at each other. He's telling me to just relax. I don't like that he's telling me that. It got to a point where I said, pull this car over. Like, I want to fight you. And he did. He pulled the car over. He gets out of the car. Well, I took that as an invitation. I'm like, okay, cool. We're doing this thing. I'm now trying to climb from the third row to the front of the car. The other guys, the veterans that are sitting in the second row, are like, no, JR, no, chill. Like, it's all good. No, I can't even think straight. I'm so angry. And not at him. I'm just angry at life and everything that I felt was working against me. And so literally, I'm so mad. I'm so angry. And finally, I end up like getting out of the car. And this is the part of my life that I'm not proud of stuff. I'm not proud to share these things with you guys. But I think it's important because I want people to understand that there was a difficulty, there was a challenge, there was some dark times, and I had to go through those dark times. Dan's out of the car, right? Imagine this. I'm Dan, he's out of the car, like this. I finally come out the passenger side, the back door. I come around to this side. At this point, Dan gets back in the car. I'm trying to open the door is locked. I'm so mad. What I did is like, I'm gonna punch the window. Well, I definitely had the awareness to be like, well, don't punch the window with your bare hand, because this is precious, skin right here, skin grab. So what I did is I took my shirt off. Now I'm gonna spare you guys that. I'm not gonna take my shirt off, but I'm gonna pretend this is my shirt, and I literally wrapped my hand in it. And imagine I wrap my hand in my shirt, and I punch and I punch. The window doesn't break. Dan doesn't get out. Dan doesn't put the window down. And he yells at me and he says, just get in the car. So at this point, I'm so angry, I'm crying, and I just walk back around to that back door, and I get in the car, and it is radio silent the entire drive back to the hotel. I'm in the third row. I'm crying just because I'm so mad. Dan is driving. We get to the hotel. Everyone gets out of the car except Dan. As I'm walking, Dan puts his window down and he tells me, JR, get in the passenger seat. I didn't want to get in the car. He says, JR, get in the passenger seat. I sit down and he says, man, you've healed physically. You have not healed emotionally or mentally. You need to cry. And I was like, cry? What do you mean I need to cry? He's like, you need to cry, man. I was like, I don't need to cry. I'm fine. He's like, no, you need to cry. He was essentially inviting me to be vulnerable. He was asking me to be vulnerable. The difference was Dan didn't give me a book and say, hey, go read about vulnerability and come back when you've read the book and you've done your homework. Instead, the most basic form of leadership, which is modeling the way. He modeled the way. Now, you can click somewhere on this link. I don't know where it's popping up, but I did a separate video where I had an interaction with somebody and they asked me about the guys that were in the Humvee the day that I was injured, if I had contact with them. And so click here. I'm just going to say here, and they can probably edit it and put it over there so I don't look foolish. But click here on this link if you want to watch that video talking about that experience, that story. And it really just kind of talks about just showing up, the importance of just doing that. But here I am with Dan. He allowed me to feel like this was a safe space. There was going to be no judgment here. And all of a sudden I started crying, and I started unloading all of this stuff that I didn't know I was carrying around, that I was living with. And I was just, everything was coming out. Here's the power of that moment. Every time Dan and I had a conversation, he would always end it with, I love you. Always. And I would always be like, oh, okay, cool, talk to you later. Think about when that quote at the beginning that Brene Brown says, think about when she talked about courage. Because he just witnessed me try to punch this window of the car. Instead, she said, no, I'm gonna have courage to sit here, to be in this space with you. That's what you need. I cried, we hugged it out at the end, and I remember looking at him and telling him, I love you. Because he proved to me that I could trust him. Vulnerability is something that you just know the feeling. You know it when it happens. And I felt that I could be vulnerable with him at that moment. And so it changed the trajectory of our friendship. He's 17 years older than me, so he's like my father. He's like an uncle. He's like a brother. He's like everything to me and to my family. Through that exercise of me essentially being vulnerable, once I started to understand that I could do that with him, and the more that I started to do it, I realized my life started to change. All the things I was pissed off about before, where I didn't get opportunities, all of a sudden now I was getting opportunities. People Magazine reached out to me. They wanted to highlight me as one of 5 veterans that they were gonna pick to talk about the 5-year anniversary of the war in Iraq at that time. I started getting inquiries to come and speak at different groups. I got the email to audition to become an actor on All My Children. Literally, not even a year later, almost a year to the day after that interaction, I was now moving to New York because I got the job to be on All My Children. So what that told me was, this is something clearly I need to be doing. Of course, after that I get dancing, and then I write a book. You think about every single one of those platforms, all I was doing was continuing to be vulnerable. I was continuing to show who I am, what I'm dealing with, what I've dealt with. I was just showing up authentically. And that's what has allowed me to create connection with a lot of you that have been following my journey for however long, is that I think a lot of you feel that authenticity. It's passion for life and for overcoming and for, just surviving. That's what it comes down to for me. And you guys feel that and connect with that, and that's why I'm so grateful to have you guys on this journey with me. But after dance and after I wrote my book, after I was, for 2 years being on the road nonstop, speaking to every group you could possibly think of, I finally had this moment where I reflected on, wait, the reason I didn't get the opportunity that I wanted during that 1.5 year time frame after I got out of the military, the reason why is because I I feel now, had I got the opportunity then, I would have screwed it up. Because I didn't have the type of intimacy that you need with yourself, first and foremost. Sense of self-awareness. I didn't have that sense of, you know, like I still had all this just toxicity that was inside of me. So I would have gotten an opportunity to speak. I would have gotten an opportunity to do whatever it was. Would I have really taken advantage of it? Probably not. And so everything is timing. And now listen, Dan is the person I go to now for everything. Everything I need to get off my chest, I need to figure out, I need to sort out. Dan is my resource. He is the guy I go to frequently. But I have been vulnerable with other people, and they've essentially taken advantage of that. It's gonna happen. So what I'm inviting you to do, call to action, is to try to find ways to show up and be a little bit more vulnerable. You don't know what type of connection you'll create with somebody. I'm gonna drop my sunglasses. I'm gonna start driving just because I'm sitting here and my car's gonna turn off in a second, and it's too damn hot in Texas for me to be sitting in the car when it says 92. It's lying. All of us are striving for connection. All of us want to feel like we're a part of a community. We're part of people. So at the end of the day, the only way you get that is through vulnerability. And so I challenge you to continue to try to be vulnerable with different people in your life. Just slowly take those little steps and start sharing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You start to identify the people that are emotionally in the right space to receive that are emotionally capable of being there, encouraging you, listening to you, supporting you. We got to change this perception of what vulnerability is. It's not weakness. It's not at all. It's not weakness. In my opinion, weakness is thinking you're going to do it by yourself. That to me is weakness. We can't do anything by ourselves in this world. Nothing can be accomplished by ourselves. You got to find your people. You got to find your community. Just trust a little bit. People are going to take advantage of, people are going to hurt you. You're going to get hurt in the process. That doesn't mean you give up. Trust me, continue to show up. You will eventually find your Dan. Peace and love.